Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm audible. I'm visible. Okay. One second. Huh? Okay. So I hope all of you had a very good weekday, and we are back with the medieval India today. So I'll wait for 2 to 3 minutes for everybody coming in. Do we need to leave watching? Aditya and Hariom, if it has already launched, then they will put it into orbit for sure. We trust ISRO about that. Okay. Have not seen. Has a launch happened? Launch was successful, then no issues at all. As I said, it will take quite a lot of time. Will take 125 days to reach. Yes, true. We'll wait for 2 more minutes. So the agenda for today is, see, we'll start early medieval. So we'll be discussing early medieval dynasties. Plus, we will talk about what is called the tripartite struggle. And then we will go on to do Turkish invasion plus Chola Empire. So the basic point is that there are multiple things which we have to cover, and there are multiple dynasties which we also have to cover today generally. So our agenda is quite straightforward, which is to traverse between the decline of Guptas to the point where Delhi Sultanate is going to get established. So very simply, the concept is that we start around 500 CE and we will reach till 1206 CE. So if to traverse close to 700 years, multiple dynasties, multiple things which we have to cover. And as always, today's class we have 12 to 3. First session is 12 to 3. Then we will have 3 to 3:40 as lunch. Then we'll go from 3:40 to 5:40 and then 6 to 8 p.m. This is part C, part B, and this is part A. So we will most probably cover early medieval dynasties in and part of tripartite in part A. Thereafter, Turkish invasion will be in the last session, where we'll discuss multiple things and multiple interesting developments which will happen across the subcontinent. Last week was more about finishing ancient India. So we took close to 1.5 weeks to cover ancient India. Same way this week and next week we will finish medieval, which is today is going to be this. Tomorrow we will do Delhi Sultanate, we will do Mughal, we will do parts of what we call as Marathas and Sikh. And by the next Saturday, we'll be done with Bhaktism and Sufism. And next to next week, we'll enter art and culture. So, very simply, no, Hardeep, no concept. Yes, there is a concept of moksha, but their concept is niyati equals to moksha. You will get it if you need. needed. So the agenda is very straightforward. Okay, so everybody's here. Can we begin today's class? As I said, early middle dynasties, tripartite struggle, Turkish invasion, Chola Empire or the Cholas, the imperial Cholas, and decline of Guptas to Delhi Sultanate. Yes, great. Okay, so for module number 7, which basically is an ancient module only, but it's called early medieval. You have 2 chapters out of R.S. Sharma, as always. Very simply, we have Ankit. I've seen your email. I will do that. Don't worry. The basic point is that we have to cover this section from our PPT and NCRT. This is for R.S. Sharma. NCRT does not have a chapter on this generally. So let's very simply contextualize everything, understand everything in the context we need to. So we stopped when we were discussing the economy, polity, and the society of Gupta Empire. So we were basically discussing the period of 300 to 500 CE. And now very simply, we have to reach 1206, which is Delhi Sultanate. For me, the next most important module is Delhi Sultanate, which is pure medieval. Pure medieval. Now, in between this, we have 2 basic subdivisions. One are called the post-Gupta dynasties, and these are called the early medieval dynasties. And in this context, if you look at it, this whole section is called early medieval, and I will discuss with you why are they called early medieval. This is called the early medieval period. In history, we have ancient, early medieval, medieval, early modern, modern. This is the way we divide all of history. And here we have very simply the 3 most important: Harsha, Chalukyas, and Pallavas. And on the other part of the spectrum, we have here Pala, Pratihara, and Rashtrakutas. These are the 3 most important, and Chola. These 7 are the most important. Other than that, I will also discuss with you or give you a very important list. By the end of the class, once we have covered till Chola, I will give you a very important list, which very simply is going to give you close to 17 to 20 dynasties. 17 to 20 dynasties, which very simply existed in between them. Just by knowing their time period, just by knowing their basic area, you can automatically answer any questions, and I will show you questions also if necessary. And out of early medieval, back to back, 2 questions have come, one in 2021, in 2022. So you can expect a question out of this area also. No, Naveen, that can't change. If I make it thinner, it becomes too thin. So very simply, this is the basic thing which we have to cover for today. Now there's a problem. And the problem is that this is descriptive. Descriptive in the sense factual. And the questions are also factual. So here, most probably, I will be giving you 3 basic type of things: rulers, contribution, and relation with each other. So my biggest and most important, what we call as request to you would be that you have to be a little bit more tolerant of heavy factual things. However, I will tell you what to learn, what not to learn. We'll revise in class itself, and I'll try to do some practice questions also. But this is a factual area, but a rewarding area, because questions have started to come from this sector also. So if we are clear with regards to what is our vision for today, I will discuss first Vakatakas with you and then move into the post Gupta period. Can we do that? Everybody is clear of the basic vision. We'll start with Vakatakas and then we will enter post-Gupta and early medieval. The drop-off being here 750. 750 and then 750 to 1206. Yes? Okay. Now, the first and foremost discussion we have is of the contemporaries of Guptas, which we, if you remember, did not discuss. The map of India at this point of time was dominated like this, wherein you had the Gupta Empire dominating most of the subcontinent, but the Vakatakas being very, very important in the Maharashtra or the Deccan sector. Both are contemporaries to each other, but the Vakatakas have a very important distinction, very important feature, which is that they're Brahmins. And they are the feudatories of Satavahanas. So very simply, who started land grant tradition in India? Who started land grant tradition in India? Very good. The Satavahanas. And therefore, Satavahanas produced a new dynasty out of their own feudatories. Now, what does a feudatory mean? Feudatory means local intermediary. This means that you have not revised last week. We have discussed previously, I will be using this word feudatory for a local intermediary or power center. So very simply, Satavahana started to give the Vakatakas so much land grants that they were able to come out of the Satavahanas and usurp power. And Vakatakas very simply dominated this sector. But why are they important to our story? For me, the rulers don't matter except for one. And I'm giving you the basic overview first itself. The most important ruler here is Harisena. Harisena is also the poet of Samudragupta. That's a different Harisena. That is sometimes written like Harisena. He's sometimes like this Harisena. But basically, it would be very clear in the examination. What are they asking? Harisena is a Vakataka ruler, the last one. And he is the most important for a very simple reason. Why? Because he was the one who constructed the Ajanta caves. What is the religion of Ajanta caves? Does anybody have any idea? We'll discuss Ajanta when we'll discuss art and culture. Ajanta, what religion is it? Buddhism. And what would be the religion of Harisena? What would be the religion of Harisena? He's a Brahmin. Now, are you getting the paradox or the syncretic nature or the tolerance of ancient India? That though being a Brahmin ruler, he was the one who's credited to actually construct one of the most beautiful or patronize the most beautiful Buddhist caves in India. So very simply, the Vakatakas are culturally very important as much as the political history matters to us in that sense. So very simple point is, three things you have to remember before I give you the factual part. Vakatakas were feudatories of Satavahanas. Land grants given by Satavahanas in turn leads to them usurping power away from the Satavahanas itself. Harisena, Ajanta caves. If these 3 points are clear, then I'll give you the basic details. What are the different branches of the rule and this and that. These 3 points you can remember. What is written on the slide you can remember, right? Okay. Harisena, Ajanta caves, Brahmins, feudatories of Satavahanas. That's it. 4 basic points of the Vakatakas. So, the Vakatakas ruled in peninsular sector and were the ones who were contemporary to the Guptas itself. We know that both are contemporaries because different texts also talk about it, and the Vindhya Satpura range was basically under them itself. We know that Brahmins were given a lot of land grants because Vakatakas were themselves Brahmins. So the land grant charters given by the Vakatakas were quite a lot. This tells us what? That the Vakatakas did not learn from the mistakes of the Satavahanas. The Satavahanas did the mistake of giving Brahmins too many land grants, and they continued that tradition further, in turn making sure that the Vakatakas would never be too powerful, because they were making sure that feudalistic tendencies were flowing across the Indian subcontinent. And this is the problem. They also patronized Buddhism, but they promoted Brahmanism also. And this is what is the story of tolerance in India. That the rulers' religion did not matter when it came to patronization. Can anybody tell me why would they need to still patronize Buddhism? Why does a ruler who's maybe a Hindu patronizing Buddhism? Patronization means that he's paying certain amount of money or giving them grants. Why would that be the case? Come on. Why would that be the case? Population was Buddhist, stability, don't know, tolerance. That time, it's not international relations, it's internal politics. You tell me one thing. The majority of Buddhists, what class or what varna were they? Merchants. So, as a ruler, do you need to make sure that your merchant community is happy? Yes or no? Yes. So, very simply, they knew that they needed to very simply patronize the Buddhists, because Buddhists were Vaishya community and Vaishya community brought in a lot of money. So very simply, the religion of the merchants was a very important priority for the state, because the money, the state revenue from merchants or from trade was very, very big. So everything is logical. It's tolerance, but it is also the self-interest of the ruler. So very simply, the Vakatakas, though Brahmins, did patronize Buddhism, a very important testimony of tolerance, but with the concept of the cognizance that state has to protect the merchants, because merchants bring in money. That is the basic point here. Okay. Now let's come to the rulers. We know that the most celebrated, the most important is Harisena, who actually developed the Ajanta caves. However, there are different rulers who very simply laid the foundation. So the first is Vidya Shakti. Don't have to learn this, just have to remember the name of Harisena. I'm just discussing this with you. Founder, he most probably ruled from the Purika sector in Maharashtra, performed Vedic sacrifices, revived Brahmanical rituals. That is of no surprise to us in that sense. Thereafter, you have the Paravrasena 1 branch, which is that he will start to expand towards the Gupta Empire and take the Deccan sector. The founder of the real power of the Vakatakas, and was able to go southwards also. So basically, the expansion part of the empire will happen under Parvasena. So Vidyashakti, Parvasena. Now it becomes complicated. After the death of Parvasena, two divisions happen in the empire. First is called the Parvapura Nandivarman branch, and the other one is called the Vatasya Gulma branch. Very simply, two different rulers come up in two different sectors. One in modern day Nagpur, one in the Akola district of Maharashtra. Now, Harisena is the one who very simply brings them together. He united the two branches, conquered the Kuntala, Avanti, Kosala, Kalinga, Konkan sector, whole of Andhra sector, whole of Deccan sector. His empire was at some point of time even touching the Bengal sector, which tells us very simply that the Guptas were declining. And the Thalnar, this is very, very important, very, very important. The Thalnar copper plate inscriptions, these are inscriptions which tell us that he was the one who started the construction of the Ajanta caves. Other than this, we don't need to know anything else about the Vakatakas. Before I move on to the other set of issues, let me summarize what we've done. Vaka Takas. The name is not that difficult to remember as it's a very interesting type of name. So Vaka Takas. Now Vaka Takas, Harisena, Ajanta, Thalnar, copper plate inscription. Thereafter, the concept that they are Brahmins patronized the Buddhist community also. Contemporaries of Guptas, Deccan sector. Anybody has any issue in any of the points I've said till this point, or what is written on the screen itself? Vidya Shakti and all does not really matter to me. Come on. Patronize means to give money. Patronize means to give money. Patronized means to provide grants. Contemporary. What is the meaning, Vivek, of contemporary? Come on, tell me. What is the meaning of contemporary? Concurrent. Very good, very good, very good, Saurabh. Alongside, Abhinav, very good. Present. Yes. Contemporary means to be parallel or to be alongside the rulers. Alongside the rulers. Okay. Perfect. So they are contemporaries to Guptas. Over and above that, Harisena, Ajanta, Thalnar patronized Buddhists but were actually Brahmins, Deccan sector. Can I move on to a graphical map based understanding of what we have to cover further? Now I brought both of these stories together. Before I move forward, did anybody revise the what we call as master timelines which I gave you last week? Did you do that? Yes? So I hope that when I wrote Gupta and Vakatakas there, now you are clear with regards to ancient. Ancient is over now. Ancient is fully over now. I want to enter post Gupta. So is everybody with me? If this is your first class, you've not seen the recordings, tell me that also. First class, not seen the recordings. If you've seen the recordings, very good. If you're live with me, which I can see from the names, that is also fine. Thalnar copper plate inscription is found in Thalnar itself. Thalnar is the place. Is everybody with me? We all are on the same page with regards to what we are doing. And Masood, did you see the videos before this? Or you're sitting with me first class with no understanding of ancient India? Vivek, you're in the class, then why will you watch the recordings? Is there anybody who's not able to make any sense of what I'm saying till this point? Can I enter post Gupta? You know the rule of the class. You have to say yes, you have to tell me. Because then we finish ancient. Yes? Great. Okay. So we enter the post Gupta period, which is very simply 500 CE onwards till 750 CE. Till 750 CE. And the simple point is that I need your imagination. I need your imagination. Now, pay attention. If a empire like Gupta's declines, if it declines, would it just automatically vanish, or there will be smaller rulers, the reminiscence of a smaller area where they still persist for some period? If Guptas decline, they will totally vanish. No. Very good. There will be smaller, fragmented, smaller rulers in that regard. So once the Guptas actually start to decline, what happens is that something called the late Guptas rise. Something called the late Guptas rise. And this is the period between 500 to 590 CE, what we are discussing. Late Guptas are nothing but the smaller reminiscence of what Guptas used to be. Core area still Patliputra, with Patliputra as the main core area. However, now the whole North and South Indian sector gets parceled into what we call as fragmented political formations, and you will see there will be multiple dynasties which will emerge. So you will first have what are called the Pushyabhutis. The Pushyabhutis rise in the Delhi, Haryana sector. Then you have somebody called the Maukharis. They emerge in the western UP sector. And in the northeastern sector, northeast sector, we have somebody called the Varmans. We have somebody called the Varmans. Varmans very simply provide stability to the North Indian sector or to the northeast sector. And in the Deccan sector emerges a smaller polity which is going to be very important later, coming out of the Vakatakas. Their name Chalukyas. And in the Gujarat sector, there will emerge another dynasty which will be called the Maitrakas. And in the deep south, there will emerge a very important dynasty, both in culture and politically, called the Pallavas. Called the Pallavas. So very simply, this is called feudatory, fragmented political formations. Now, are you able to recall why I said that the Satavahanas added poison to the political landscape of the Indian subcontinent? Because they introduced a tendency in which all of these are nothing but feudatories. The Pushyabhutis, the Maukharis, the Varmans are feudatories of whom? Who are they feudatories of? Local intermediaries of whom? Strengthened by the Guptas itself. So they would be the feudatories of whom? I've already given you the answer. They are feudatories of whom? Of which dynasty? To be more precise, the Guptas. The Guptas gave Varmans, gave Maukharis, gave Pushyabhutis, what we call as late Guptas gave these people land grants in lieu of their service, and they were able to very simply usurp power. On the other hand, Chalukyas, Maitrakas, and the Pallavas, they will emerge from the which feudatory? Very good, Neha. Which is the Vakatakas. The Vakatakas again did something which the Satavahanas did, and the Vakatakas disintegrated into their own smaller political formations: Maitrakas, Chalukyas, Pallavas. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 different actors for 90 years who play a very important role in the northern sector. This is how this was nothing but erstwhile Gupta Empire. This was nothing but the Gupta Empire previously. ठीक. Now, If this makes sense to you, this is not the last map. This is not the ultimate map, because after 590, there is further consolidation. But to just show you this in a more geographical way, see, Pushyabhutis, Maukharis, late Guptas, Varmans, Maitrakas, Chalukyas, Pallavas. Anybody has issues till 590. This is called fragmentation. The Gupta dynasty fragmented, but how? Dharmendra, again, either you did not watch the video or you are not there live. Can anybody tell me, or tell rather Dharmendra, how would the Gupta dynasty fragment? What is the question? What is the answer to his how? How will the Gupta dynasty fragment? Neha is saying, Neil is saying, Sumit is saying, Hardeep is saying that it is land grants. Weak rulers, land grants by supporting local intermediaries, developing feudatories due to land grants, by giving land grants. Now, can one of you just be kind enough to tell Dharmendra, how does a land grant lead to fragmentation? I'll give you time to type. I'll push your comment on the screen itself. How does a land grant lead to fragmentation? You can type. Don't need to type in one word. You can type. I'm giving you time. I could easily answer this question, but I want to see, have you internalized the processes which we are discussing? Decentralized empire. Smaller powers emerge. Okay. I'll push this one. 1 second. This is one answer, Dharmendra. This is the second answer from Avani. Very kind of them. It develops feudalistic tendencies. Some Hishta. Very good. Very good. Very good. Good. So you all are historians yourself. Local power intermediaries develop their own powers. Very good. Neha, your decentralized empire core periphery is also right. I'm trying to push that. It's not coming on the screen, but I wanted to do that. Okay. I think Dharmendra answer is now, or question is now answered. Dharmendra, makes sense? Neil says, give rise to local intermediaries. They develop small powers due to their excessive land grants. Thereafter, smaller powers, land grants encourage local power centers. It develops feudalistic tendencies, and the local intermediaries usurp power from the main kingdom and command power in the given region. Very good. Appeasement of Brahmins, this is the starting. This is the first process, the starting process. Land grants given local intermediaries. Make sense? Everyone? Dharmendra, question answered. Can we move on? Yes? Great. So I hope that you like this feature. This is always the feature there. I could have easily answered this question, but I'll very simply, yes, Vivek, your point is also correct. Means get salaries. Yeah, they get land grants instead of salaries itself. So this is something which I can do, which is to push this into the PPT or into your screen itself, and I leave it here so that future generations can also admire the very beautiful answers which you all have given. Okay, let's move on. Now, the period between 590 CE onwards, now we very simply need to understand what happens thereafter. Everybody's with me till this point? No issues? Yes, no? Come on. Yes, sir. Very good. Okay. So, no issues. Now, so 590 onwards, there's a process of consolidation. And the process of consolidation is that the Pushyabhutis are able to emerge as the single largest power in North India. And you know, one of the most powerful kings of him, which is Harshvardhana or Harsha, as he's called. In the northeastern sector, the Varmans are able to consolidate power. Thereafter, in the Deccan sector, you have the Maitrakas, the Chalukyas, and the Pallavas. So, very simply, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. From this to this, the two losers here are the Mokharis and the late Guptas, because the Pushyabhutis are able to internally move and conquer this sector. So if you look at it, the empire of Harsha is nothing but Pushyabhutis. Varmans are able to get their main area, within which they had a small dynasty called the Gauda. Thereafter, the Maitrakas are able to manage the Gujarat sector in that sense. Chalukyas and Pallavas now basically block the peninsular sector itself. The three biggest dynasties at this point of time are Harshvardhan, Chalukya, and Pallava. And we will also concentrate on these three, which is 1, 2, 3. These three are of a lot of significance to us. And very simply, this is the map which you need to understand and internalize in the way how it is evolving. From Pushyabhuti, Maukharis, late Guptas to Varmans, to Maitraka, Chalukya, Pallavas, to Pushyabhuti, Varmans, Maitraka, Chalukya, Pallavas. This will very simply help you in understanding and internalizing it in a better way, because that will be the way you can actually understand. That is the way you can understand the thing in your mind. And I'll tell you one more thing. Very simply, Ashwanti, is this lecture and book list enough for Indian Forest Service? You would need a little bit more depth, because we are more towards prelims oriented, and Forest Service you need ancient and medieval in both subjective. So you also have to understand concepts more than the facts. So the difference is a little bit on orientation. I already pointed this out that for IFOS Forest Services you need a little bit more of stress and understanding. Okay, so Pushyabhuti, Maukhari, late Guptas, Varmans, and the whole sector becomes like this. Now, are we clear with regards to the transitions? Because this is something which you need to understand, that now India will just be a jigsaw puzzle. There will be different dynasties which will come through, which will automatically form themselves, and they will keep on changing their orientation. So by 590, you have 7 different dynasties. By 625, you have only 5, out of which 3 are very important to us. If this is clear, which is the political map of India, then I would like to go into the second part, which is to discuss the Pushyabhutis, the Chalukyas, and the Pallavas. Can we do that? And I'll show you a question which came in 2021. If you had remembered this map in 2021, you could have answered one question automatically. They had asked which of the following dynasties were there. If you've seen that post Gupta dynasties between 6th century to 9th century, which existed. And the answer basically was the late Guptas and the Maitrakas and the Pushyabhutis. 3 were there, and the other 2 were actually early medieval. I'll show you that question, but a simple point is this can help you actually understand. The Varman spelling is not V-E-R, V-A-R, Varmans. That is a different Varma, that is a different Varma. Okay. Now, let's talk about Pushyabhutis. Can I? Everybody's with me, no issue. Okay. Now, a lot of students confuse two things. Harshvardhan is a ruler of the Pushyabhutis. We don't know too much about the other rulers because the most celebrated and most well documented Pushyabhuti ruler is only Harshvardhan. So Harshvardhan is considered the most powerful, the most important, and we know about him so much because of a text which is called Harsha Charita, written by a person called Bana Bhatta. Basically, this is his poet, this is the text. I have previously also referred to this text in the period of the Mauryans because the Harshcharita refers to the Mauryans also. Now, there are three things which make the post-Gupta period exhibit early medieval features, and they are well demonstrated in Harsha's empire. Now the fundamental question is what are the features of early medieval period or dynasties? This is the fundamental question which we need to understand, because if I'm able to make you understand this, then you will automatically start to see why I call all of these as early medieval. The first such concept is fragmented, decentralized political structure. Second, fragmented army, which is imperial army plus feudatory army. Third, feudatory mentality. And fourth, urban contraction or decline, or trade decline specifically, or rather we should say foreign trade starts to decline. Now, what do I mean by fragmented decentralized political structure? See, very simply, the first thing is that they don't have a centralized model of control. A centralized model of control, a good example would be whom or which dynasty? Very good. The Mauryas. The Mauryas have a very elaborate bureaucratic system. The ruler controls everything. It's a proper, what we call as centralized control of administration and the people. Very good. Herein, it is the other part of the spectrum, wherein the king only controls the feudatories or local intermediaries, and the local intermediaries control the people. So very simply, the king was never that powerful as he maybe have been in the Mauryan or the early Gupta period. A very important part or a very important reason for decentralized control is a second point, which is that they have a fragmented army also. What do you mean by that? Fragmented army means that very simply, you cannot have a large standing army because of fiscal issues. So the king has maybe 10,000 men, and other than the king, there are feudatories who contribute 5,500. So very simply, in the larger perspective, if you look at it, a feudatory could be contributing 5,000, but there are 10 feudatories, so there's a 50,000 army, but the real army is only 60,000, and the 10,000 are actually under the king. So think of it like this, that the Indian army would not be one centralized army as it is today. Rather, it would be the center having one set of army and then each and every state contributing their armies. This in turn is not a very good structure, because the biggest issue in a fragmented army is that there are two things. First, it takes time in mobilization. Mobilization means is, if today is the war, I would have to intimate all the feudatories to send their 5,000 men 10 to 15 days before. On the other hand, the biggest issue is that they all have what we call as feudatory mentality. Feudatory means a local power intermediary. In India, feudalism never existed. Whenever we use the term feudatory, we use it for a local power intermediary. Now, what is feudatory mentality? Feudatory mentality is I don't care politics, which is that if there's one feudatory A and there's one feudatory B and there's one feudatory C, if I attack B, A and C will not do anything, because according to them, it's not their problem, so I don't care. If I attack C, then B and A will not respond, because they have feudatory mentality, fragmented mentality, wherein they will not respond to what is happening to C. If I attack A, C and B will not respond, because they really don't care. It is not their problem. Not my problem politics, wherein only when somebody comes together and brings them into one empire, then they would have to send their army to someone else. Still, they have dominated what we call a feudatory mentality, that the army will never be as committed as a centralized army would be. So feudatory mentality is a very dangerous mentality which emerges at this point of time, wherein not my problem politics. If you are getting attacked, that is your problem. When he will attack me, that is my problem. And I will show you that this is the single-handed reason why Ghazni was able to come in, basically loot India multiple times, and why Gori was also able to defeat Prithviraj Chauhan. This is the single-handed reason why the Indian subcontinent became extremely weak, which is not my problem politics. So add to it foreign trade declining. With foreign trade declining, how will they pay off their officers or their bureaucracy, whatever it may be? How will they do it? Tell me. Very good. So land grant. So it becomes a vicious circle. It actually becomes a vicious circle, because there is urban contraction, revenue will decline, and when revenue will decline, in turn state will pay through land grants. Land grants will localize power, create feudatories, and these feudatories will fragment the polity. No good law and order, which will only lead to decline in trade. And when there is decline in trade, there is further urban contraction. So if you look at it, it is basically a vicious circle. The state can't provide an environment which is conducive for trade. So urbanism or urbanization is going to contract. Revenue will decline. State will pay through land grants. And very simply, this is the biggest issue. This circle is the biggest issue, that the state is not learning from its mistakes. This is the process of decentralization and fragmentation throughout the early medieval period. Anybody has any doubt with regards to features and process? No? Okay. So now let's go back to Harshvardhan. Now, when I was talking about Harshvardhan, I said that Harshvardhan had all the features of an early medieval dynasty. See, the facts which you need to remember for him, as you know, is Harsh Charita Ban. Now, he had decentralized control, not a new thing. He had fragmented army, also not anything new to us. But a very interesting thing about Harshvardhan is that Huan Sang, written in different ways, the way you like it, that is totally on you. Huan Sang actually visited the Indian subcontinent during his reign. And the irony is, Harshvardhana, yes, he's a Hindu. He's a Hindu, not a Brahmin, but a Hindu, Kshatri. Now, if, for example, the Chinese foreign minister comes to India and he goes to the, for example, the market to check out the UPI feature, and he's robbed on the streets, does it look good that a foreign minister from a different dynasty or from a different place got robbed in a state? Does it look good? Or is it actually something which is very confidence instilling? No. Very good. This is what happens under Harshvardhan. Hyun Sang gets robbed on the streets of Pushyabhuti dynasty. And now this Chinese traveler had nothing, no other option but to go to Harshvardhan. And Harshvardhana is able to retrieve his what we call as belongings, and the what we call as robber is given capital punishment. Capital punishment means that he is basically tortured to death. Now this basically gives us three simple what we call as indicators. The first indicator is that there's a law and order breakdown and issue. Second, we get to know that justice is based on physical force. And last but not the least is Harshvardhan projects power, but empire is weak from within. Are you able to get this point? This is the most important point for me. In the Harsha Charita, there will be a lot of things which Banabhatta will argue. However, it seems that he was exaggerating, because when it comes to ground realities, the ground reality is totally different. It's totally different. The way it should be, it isn't. Totally different ground realities there. So, Harshvardhan is a very good example of decentralized political structure. And he also has one more very troubling distinction, which is the one that he institutionalized land grants as salary. What do I mean by this? Which is that previously people used to give it in, but the rulers very simply used to give it when they were in a crunch. That was something which was compelled. They were compelled to give land grants. He rather actually made it a state policy and did not create no attempt or did not have any attempt to pay them in cash. His concept was that I will give it in land grant only. So the salary concept was fully diluted, and very simply he institutionalized land grants as salary. This is a very important distinction because Harshvardhan now made it a state policy that everybody who works for the state will be paid in land grants, which again adds to our very simple decentralization circle. This is the basic point. So, what is written on this slide, if you can concentrate on this and understand these points, then I will move into the factual part. This is going to be standard policy now. I'll give you the basics which you need to know. Other than that, there's further details which will be reinforced to the PPT. So Harshvardhan, Pushyabhuti, anybody has a problem? Whatever I've discussed with you. Decentralized, fragmented, Huensang, institutionalized land grants, projected power was not that powerful, and capital punishment and weakness of land law and order issue. Anybody has any issue in these points or this discussion till this point? Understood? Okay. So let's talk about the Pushyabhutis. We are now going to talk about the Pushyabhuti dynasty. We're going to concentrate on them. And unfortunately, for the Pushyabhutis, it was one thing very clear that northwestern sector, the Huns had actually, a Central Asian tribe had actually captured it. So he could neither go northward, neither go southward, neither go eastward, very simply, or westward, because he was surrounded by very powerful kingdoms, powerful fragmented, but very simply powerful feudatories in that regard. So let's talk about the political structure of this period. So we know that the Guptas had given a lot of stability to the Doab region, to the northern Indian sector for a very long time. However, they split up into multiple dynasties, wherein the Hunas were able to establish themselves in the northwestern sector, and north and western sector was then parceled by half a dozen different feudatories. But the most important feudatory which was able to usurp power rose from Thanesar in Haryana and brought everybody together, who was Harshvardhana of the Pushyabhuti dynasty itself. Thereafter, a very important process which also was introduced by Harshvardhan, which I'll discuss it here only, which is that during Harsha's period, there is a, pay attention to the words, eastward shift, not eastward, rather westward. Westward shift of power away from Patliputra to Kannauj. Patliputra for centuries had been a trade center, but with Roman trade declining, what happens is Kannauj, which is a little bit more towards Delhi, now becomes the shift of power towards it. And the reason was that in all the different areas, with the decline of Roman trade, Patliputra was too away from the Uttarpat and Dakshinpat trade centers. So Kannauj, in that regard, was able to give a lot of stability to trade internally for sure. External trade had more or less declined, but internal trade had not declined, and therefore Kannauj became now the new seat of power. And very simply, there will be further eastward movement, or rather further westward movement as we go on. With Delhi Sultanate, it will become Delhi. So we are moving away from Bengal towards Punjab as the seat of power because of the closeness to the trade centers and the northwestern sector, which will be the land route or the most important trade route at this point of time. Thereafter, we know that Ban Bhatta's Harshcharita is the way we reconstruct his history. Hyun Sang also wrote about him when he came to India. Harsha has been called in different books, which makes no sense, as a last Hindu emperor. But there are multiple dynasties which come after him also. He did not rule whole of India also, and he was not a staunch Hindu because he actually patronized Buddhists also, and actually, very simply, was a very tolerant personality. So he's not a very staunch Hindu, or neither did he actually rule India in that regard. Now, for us, why is Harshvardhan important? Wherein his features of administration testify to us that it is an early medieval period. Harshvardhan is an example of transition from ancient to medieval times. First is that he governed his administration through decentralized control, feudal decentralized control. Second, the feudatories contributed to these foot soldiers. So very simply, fragmented army. Third, land grants were made to priests and to the people who gave service to the state. And he is credited to have basically made land grants a institutionalized process for giving it to the priests also. But more than that, officers' salaries were nothing but land grants. We've discussed these points, just reinforcing it. First revision. Thereafter, we know that Harshvardhan, the way Hyun Sang divided his money was that he had one for officers, one for public servants, one for religious endowments, one for scholars. This was actually not true. He had not a lot of money in that sense, but very simply, he did give certain cash transfers, but land was the way he mostly rewarded everyone. We also know that law and order was an issue. Hyun Sang is going to get robbed, and capital punishment will be inflicted on the robber. Harshvardhan was able to very simply catch the robber in that regard. So, this is the story of the Pushyabhutis. Anybody has any issue in Pushyabhuti? These are the basic points which you need to remember. As I said, this is the unfortunate part of the story, that there is a lot of facts here. This is the only painful part. Thereafter, once we enter the Turkish invasion period, there is no facts in that regard. Neha, when you have state policy of giving land grants to Buddhist viharas and chaityas were actually maintained by him, so it is enough evidence to tell us about his tolerance. He is the first to institutionalize. Yes. In the corner, I've written justice is based on physical force, projects power, but empire is weak from within. What is the reason why there is a shift of sea? Try to understand this point. Kannauj is somewhere here. Kannauj is somewhere here. And Patliputra is here. So the reason why Patliputra was important was because the Uttar Path, both sectors, and the Dakshin Path were connected to Patliputra. But the reason Patliputra was important was because all in these trade routes, there was a lot of Roman trade or gold which was flowing. Once this trade more or less, which is Uttar Path, Dakshin Path, starts to contract, Kannauj becomes an important center because it is much more closer to the northwestern sector, which is the land routes. And it is also closer to the Gujarat coast. And with this orientation changing of trade, Roman trade not coming through in this sector, there's a westward shift of power, or westward shift of what we call as power centers. Makes sense? It's all based on trade and movement of urbanism. Roman trade very simply declines the oldest city, Patliputra, in that regard. Yes, his capital was Thanesar, but a very important city under him was Kannauj. Okay. So our first part of the first major dynasty is clear, which is the Pushyabhutis. Now comes the Chalukyas. Now come the Chalukyas. Now I will give you a very important word of advice. Do not Google Chalukyas. Why? Because there are 5 different types of Chalukyas. The ones which we are discussing are called early Chalukyas or the Chalukyas of Badami, Vatapi. But there is also Eastern Chalukya, Western Chalukya. Solankis are also sometimes called Chalukyas. And there's a late Chalukya also. And this is also Chalukya. The only reason I am discussing Chalukyas is for one man. And that one person is Pulakesin II. Pulkesin II is one of the most important personalities in this area because he had the power to keep both the Pushyabhutis and the Pallavas at bay. So in the north, he had Pushyabhutis, and in the south, he had Pallavas. Westward shift also helped in. Yes, that is also true. That will be a little bit more true, Varsha, when we move when we move towards the Delhi Sultanate period. But yes, if you move towards the west, you can keep your northwestern sector much more powerful. That's a very good way of putting it, also, but more true for the period which we are going to see further. So Pushyabhuti, Pallavas. Now, very important point you need to understand is that there is a perpetual struggle between the Pallavas and the Chalukyas for this sector. This sector is basically the bone of contention between these two powers, and this sector is very important because it is called the Tungabhadra Doab or the Raichur Doab. Doab means between two rivers. So this is the most fertile sector in the South Indian sector because of the Tungabhadra and Krishna basically making the most what we call as fertile alluvial plains or the Doab itself. So very simply, the Chalukyas and the Pallavas are locked into conflict. Sometimes the Pallava is able to push in, sometimes the Chalukyas are able to push out. The simple point is, this is a perpetual story of Pallava and Chalukya conflict. So, for me, first thing is to make you more acclimatized by these terms. And why am I saying this? Because these are the dynasties who are also culturally important. So when I will say in art and culture, Chalukya, Pulkesin II, Ayyol inscription, you should be able to automatically identify, okay, sir is talking about post-Gupta period, Chalukya-Pallava relationship. So first is Chalukyas and rulers. There are multiple, but Pulkesin II is the most important. Can you remember these two words for me? Chalukya, Pulkesin II. Not a very difficult name to remember. Pulkesin II. Yes? Okay. Now, why are they called Chalukyas of Badami or Vatapi? Badami is the modern name of a place called Vatapi. Vatapi was their capital. Now, when we talk about the Chalukyas of Badami or Vatapi, ruled over the Deccan sector for close to 200 years, from the Badami sector from Karnataka. Vatapi is the ancient name of Badami itself, and both of them, Chalukyas and Pallavas, are in a very simple conflict between who will control the Krishna Tungabhadra Doab or the Raichur Doab. Now, for a UPSC aspirants, we should be really thankful. We should write a thank you note to the Chalukyas because they are very kind to us. Why? Because the rulers did not take firstly weird names or they just repeated their names. So if you learn three names, you can automatically remember all of them. Pulkesin 1, Pulkesin 2, Kirtivarman 1, Kirtivarman 2, Vikramaditya 1, Vikramaditya 2. We just hate this person, Vijayaladitya, who actually did not go with Kirti or Pulkesin or Vikramaditya. He just went with his own name. So, we all thank Chalukyas with a very big bouquet of flowers because they made our task easier. Pulkesin II, most powerful and important ruler. So, Pulkesin, Kirtivarman Pulkesin, PKP Thereafter, VVVK. So here, just remember, this is Vijayaditya. We can put in like this. I'm not asking you to remember all of them, but just remember the first three. Pulkesin, Kirtivarman, Pulkesin 2. 1, 1, 2. 1, 1, 2. And you have Vik, Vik, Vij, Vik, and K. Kirt. Or whatever you want to keep it. Very simply, the point is that he is the odd one out, which is that he is Vijayaditya. All other are Vikramaditya or Pulkesin or Kirtivarman. But for me, who really matters is this person, Pulkesin 2. Can I discuss why Pulkesin 2 is important or what are his most important contributions? Yes? Anybody has any issue? I'm giving you the trick. I'm telling you what to remember. That's the only thing you need to do. So let's talk about Pulkesin 1. He established the kingdom at Badami. Thereafter, took multiple titles. Don't have to remember this. Kirtivarman I expanded the empire by fighting the Kadambas, Nalas, and later his son Pulkesin II was a minor when he died. So, a very important point you need to understand: the Chalukyas were surrounded by smaller feudatories called Kadambas, Nalas, and the Alupas. So what they actually did was they overran on each one of them to basically consolidate the empire. But the problem was that once Kirtivarman I is going to die, his son Pulkesin II was actually a minor. So when your son is a minor, his uncle Mangalesa actually ruled in his name. But once Kirtivarman II became an adult, Mangalesa said that I will not give up power. So very simply, Pulkesin II had to fight with Mangalesa to capture power, and there was a civil war initially to come to power itself. How do we know so much about Pulkesin II? Because his court poet, very important one, and the inscription which is today in Aiyol in Karnataka, which is Aiyol inscription of Ravikriti, talks or tells us about a lot of his conquests and how he was a very important ruler in this sector. So he talks about how the Kadambas, the Alupas, the Western Gangas, all feudatories in and around the Deccan sector were defeated. More than that, Pulkesin II defeated Harshvardhan in the Battle of Narmada, which made sure that Harshvardhan could not go southwards. That is why actually assumed a title called Dakshin Parmeshwara, which is I am the Parmeshwar, the god of south. And Pulkesin II was responsible for bringing in dynastic wars with the Pallavas also, and he invaded the Pallavas kingdom twice. So he was extremely powerful, was able to thrust into the Pallavas 2 times. Vikramaditya drove the Pallavans out once the Pallavas were trying to take revenge for what Pulkesin II had done. Then you have Vijayaditya, 40 years rule, very prosperous, but not as big as Pulkesin II. And Kirtivarman II, one of the governors, his own governor, Danti Durga, who was being given too many land grants, will establish the Rashtrakutas, which is part of the tripartite struggle. Now, again, a lot of different data, what to do with it. See, Pulakesin II, Ravikriti, Aiyol inscription, 1, 2, 3, Battle of Narmada, Pulakesin II versus Harshvardhana wins, and Pallavan conflict. Can you remember what I've written on this slide? Yes, Vikramaditya I would be son of Pulkesin II. One, Sridevi, I'll tell you one thing. Very good question. Very good question you asked me. I'll answer that also. But first, tell me, Pallavan Pallavan conflict means that they are fighting with the Pallavas. When I teach you Pallavas, you will realize the depth of that conflict. Battle of Narmada, Pallavan conflict, Aiol inscription, Ravi Kriti, Pulkeshin 2. Anybody has any issue in this? Because Sri Devi's made a very important point and I want to talk about that. Anybody has any issue here? Come on. Be more vocal. If it's not making sense, you need to tell me that. No issues. Okay. Right. Sundaresh, what do I need to repeat? What to remember? What you have to remember is Pulkeshin 2 is a Chalukya ruler. You also have to remember that his court poet is Ravi Kriti. He wrote the Aiol inscription, which talks about his conquest. Battle of Narmada, Pulkeshin 2 versus Harshvardhan. Harshvardhan is defeated, and Pallavan conflict started under him. Same thing written in the PPT, revising with you the second time. Anybody has any issue here? Come on. Sian, first you write, give your comments in the chat, not in doubt. But why they use 1 and 2 as they're the same name? See, this tradition is not specific to India. It's something which is there in Europe also. Charles 1, 2, 3, James 1, 2, 3 standard. See, the point is that you tend to draw on very powerful rulers, and if they're related to each other, they try to bring in their father's name. So it's about drawing on legacy. But this brings a very interesting question which Sri Devi asked. Very good question. And the question is, was he the son of Pulkesin, or father, mother, brother? These questions do come in our mind, that what is the relationship between Kirti Varman 1, Kirti Varman 2, this, that, standard. Now, I want to very simply say one thing to you very clearly. Don't ever try to learn that. Because if you do that, the whole examination will become a CSAT paper. The father of the mother of the brother, and the person you are looking at in the picture is the mother of my father of my sister of this and that. Don't. Why? Because maybe in ancient India, they will follow father son relationship. Once you go into medieval, there is no chronology like that. Because a ruler, if he's competent, could come to power, no point of relationships. More than that, it's not that straightforward when it comes to ancient or medieval, or except for modern India. Because some sources will say he's the son, some sources will say cousin, some sources will say something else, and I don't care. So I will only learn Pulkeshin, Kirtivarman, who is the father, mother, grandfather. It doesn't really matter to me. As it is, there's already too much to remember. So by going into relationships, you will waste your time. And one thing is very, very clear, UPSC doesn't care. If UPSC will give a question, is Pulkeshin to the son of Mangalesa, then that day clearing that examination will become very easy. Remember this point. UPSC is not a PCS level examination. Maybe you will get it in Karnataka PCSC or in Rajasthan PCSC, whose brother, father, mother. UPSC will rather ask you a much more difficult question than asking this, because this is an easy question. So very simply, modern is a little bit different, more clearly defined in certain sources, that too in British India. But ancient medieval, you would have realized one thing. I have actually not told you anything. I've actually, till this point, never referred to anybody as son and this. Uncle Mangalesa we know, because that is something which is documented in Aiol inscription. So I hope you understand why I don't care, and why I don't want you to care. Because it is a set of information which will not take you anywhere. And we are doing smart study with hard work rather than doing meaningless hard work itself. So I hope you all can agree with me. If you still want it, I'll be happy to give you the relationships. But after a point, it will become so much that you will actually say, sir, stop, we don't want to know. Right? See, my funda is very clear. I never teach something which I would not learn myself. So I know what a student's perspective is. I know what you are going through as a UPSC aspirant, and I know how much you have to cover. You don't have to just cover history, but multiple subjects. So if I'm doing an unrealistic concept that I'm coming with extremely heavy PPTs, has everything, pull case into this, that, fought with him, fought with that, this rule, this, I never do that. You've seen I give minimal dates also. What are only important I give you. That is to make sure that you get the 6 questions in the examination and you clear this examination. Your task is not to do BA honors. Your task is to clear this examination, and that is why this is the orientation we need to have. I can teach at optional also, I can teach at academic also. I've taught for BA honors, MA, masters also. Separate issue altogether. So I know where I am in the level. So very simply, good point she asked me, because this would come up very soon. So I'm trying to tell you that right now itself. Do not complicate it when it is already simple. So we have discussed the Harshvardhana dynasty and the Chalukyas. Anybody has any issue in learning these basic facts? These are must facts, cannot ignore in that regard. Once I've done with the Pallavas, I'll give you a break. Fully clear now? Great. Now, Pallavas are extremely important. Why? Because they are the single-handed reason why we have such beautiful temples in South India. Because it is from the Pallava architecture that actually Dravida architecture comes out. Dravida architecture is an evolution of Pallavan architecture. So please understand this, culturally the most important rulers. And as we know, they are fighting with the Chalukyas. So there's already interaction in them. Chalukyas are important. I'll tell you why. Because of they are the ones who have Vesara style. So what I'm trying to actually do here, and you will realize that when I will teach you art and culture, I'm creating a base for you. So that when I say Chalukya, it actually resonates with you. When I say Pallava, it resonates with you. Okay, Pallava, Chalukya. So Pallava's most important contribution, rather than fighting with the Chalukyas, would be that they are the genesis of the concept of Dravida architecture itself, which is the reason why the Cholas were able to make the temples they were able to make. Now, there are 3 rulers here who are very, very important, other than the standard, what we call as sequence. Again, they are very, very kind to us, very kind to us. They have taken, again, very simple, straightforward names. For example, Mahendra Varman Man, Narsim Varman, Mahendra Varman II, Narsim Varman II, Nandi Varman, and Aparajita Pallava. So, except for the first and the last, they are actually in the same sequence 1 2 1 2 1 2. Now, you see 1 1 2 2. Now, please understand this. There are 3 rulers here who are extremely important, because you will see their names sprinkled across the news in the paper itself, and in art and culture questions also. You're expected to remember their name. First is Mahendra Varman I. He is the one who started rock cut architecture in Pallavas. Now, what does rock cut means? Basically to break down a rock. But for now, just presume you know rock cut. I will tell you what is rock cut structural when we'll discuss that. Rock cut is when you take a rock and cut it down and make something. Rock cut architecture evolved into structural. Structural is how this building has been made, or how your house has been made, which is with bricks. Structural temples. Now, Narsimvarman 1 is called Mamala, and Narsimvarman 2 is called Rajsimha. These are the 2 titles, and they are remembered actually by their titles, which is that Mahendra Varman 1 is called Mahendra Varman 1 But Narsimharman 1 is called Narsimharman 1 Mamala, and Narsimharman 2 is called Narsimharman 2 Rajsimha. And both are important because, again, cultural contribution. Mahabalipuram is actually named after Narsimharman 1. And the Shore temple, which is the first structural temple exhibiting Dravida style, is Narsimharman 2 Rajsimha. I'll show it to you in the PPT. But you have to remember Mahendra, Narsim, Narsim. Mahendra, Mamala, Rajsimha. So, very simply, the concept is that they are culturally very, very important. How did Nandhivarman took his name? Nandhivarman one, in between this, there are total 35 rulers. I have skipped the ones which are not important. So there would be a Nandhivarman one also. But I don't care about him. Understand this. Dynastic cycles, 200 years they've ruled. So there cannot be just this much, 35 rulers. For me, who are the most important? 1, 2, 3. I'll write it down in the end also, don't worry. So, Simhavishnu, follower of Vaishnavism, obviously it is coming out of his name itself. Vishnu is there in the name. Then comes Mahendra Varman. Mahendra Varman is a very important personality because culturally he contributed quite a lot. He wrote a drama, and have to remember it, and that too in Sanskrit language. In the Tamil sector, he's writing in Sanskrit language. Very, very important. He was also a one who was initially a Jain, then became a Shaivite under a saint, and therefore, very simply, he basically, his father was a Vaishnavite, he was a Jain, and then became a Shaivite, which is the follower of Shiva. So the way you see syncretism in South India, in India at this point of time, is exemplary. Further, Mahendra Varman I was the one who was killed in the battle of Pallalur by Pulkesin II. Remember, Pulkesin II entered into the Pallavan sector. So he was actually killed by Pulkesin II. I have a sequence in the end, don't worry about that also. Then comes Narsimharman I. He will avenge his father's death by defeating Pulkesin II in the battle of Manimangala, and he will kill him and the battle of Badami, and took the title Mahamala or Mahabali, from which the city which he started, Mahabalipuram or Mamalapuram, comes out. So Mahabalipuram city near Chennai is actually named after him. His capital, Hyunsang, reached till Kachi during his reign, and according to a very important, what we call a Sri Lankan source, Mahavamsa, he was so powerful that he helped a Celanese, which is a Sri Lankan king or a prince, a Manavarman, to come to power. So very simply, he helped him. He sent his army to help him. Then Mahendravarman II was killed by Vikramaditya I, meaning now the Chalukyas have avenged the death of Pulkesin II by killing a Pallavan. Then comes the most powerful Narasimhavarman II Rajsimha, who had a very good relationship with Southeast Asia, with China, built the Dravida style temple, and he is the one who started structural temples, and more than that, Dravida style. Two very important temples he made: Shore temple at Mahamalapuram, Mahabalipuram, Kailashnath temple at Kanchipuram. They operate from Kanchi. Kanchipuram is mostly their center. Now, this is what you have to remember for the examination. Very, very, very important. Can come as a question straightforward. Pulkesin II defeated whom? Mahendravarman. A Chalukyan defeated a Pallavan. To avenge that, Narsimvarman, a Pallavan, defeated Pulkesin II, a Chalukyan, and thereafter, in order to avenge the death, a Chalukyan then defeated a Pallavan. So, are you getting the point? How they are defeating each other to avenge the death of their fathers? So Pulkesin 2 will defeat Mahendra Varman. So PM1, then MP2 and VM2. If you can remember this much, you will be able to answer any question. This is the interpretation of whatever we've read till this point. Very important sequence for you generally. Anybody has any issue? You can see very heavy sector, but I'm trying to condense the data so as to give you a basic picture. So if, let's do one thing. Let's revise and then take a break. And I'll ask you a question and let's see if you're able to answer it also or not. We discussed Pushyabhuti, Harshvardhan, Hyunsang, feudalistic, proper feudalistic dynasty, and simple point, he was able to consolidate North India. Harshcharita, Bana. Then comes the Pulkesin series, Pulkesin 2, Ravikriti, Ayyol, Pallava, Battle of Narmada, where he defeats where he defeats Harshvardhan, and in a way, Battle of Palalur, where he defeats Mahendravarman I. Now comes the Pallavas, wherein Mahendravarman, Narsimvarman, Narsimvarman II. Mahendravarman, Narsimvarman I is Mahamala, Narsimvarman II is Rajsimha. Their most important contribution, cultural, architectural, and back and forth. This is the basic points I've made. I'll make two questions in front of you. If you're able to answer these questions, then only I move forward. You don't have to remember their chronology also. Because Sridevi, there are multiple parallels with each other. Rather than remembering chronology, remember this. That is why I've given you this. They are actually out of sync with each other, but basically are contemporaries to each other itself. So wherever the chronology is going to be important, I will tell you that. I'm going to make a question in front of you. If you're able to answer it, then only we take a break. Okay? Column 1, column 2. Correctly matched. 1 pair, 2 pair, 3 pair, none. I'm pushing the poll to you. Give me the answer. Come on. Now we are revising through questions so that I can close this sector itself. Everybody has to answer. Come on. So 45% are totally correct, 38% have got confused, and 10 and 8% are not listening to me. Okay. The answer is what? 1 pair. Which pair is correct? Very good. 3 is the correct pair. Shore temple was made by the Vallavas. Was made by the Pallavas. Ravi Kriti is not the what we call as writer or poet for the Pushyabhutis. He is for the Chalukyas, Pulkesin II. And Banabhatta is the historian of Pushyabhutis, Harshcharita. So I just interchange 1 and 2. Now are you getting what type of question can come from this area? Right? You want one more type of question? One more question, then I can take a break. Yes, I want more than 70% correct. Only then we take a break. Right? Okay. I hope this helps. If this helps, we can do this more often. which is not to just rely on previous year questions, but to actually apply our knowledge. Okay. Now, mm, okay. It is after this, it's morning batch only, I think. Come on, everybody answer. Mhm, 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 mhm. 1949% 2. All three are correctly matched. Ajanta caves made by Vakatakas, totally correct. Aiol inscription is Chalukyas, Pulkeshin 2. Battle of Narmada is between whom? Battle of Narmada is between two rulers. Which two rulers? Battle of Narmada. Harshvardhan and Pulkeshin 2. Pushyabhuti means Harshvardhan, right? So isn't it either of them was written? So it is becomes the right answer. So isn't the answer C? Getting your mistake because a lot of you answered B. So most probably you omitted or rather got the second statement incorrect. Right? Yes, sir. Okay, very good. So one more. Need to be sure you are clear with this area. You realize your mistake, I hope. Okay. Now, at this rate, okay. Come on. We take a break after this. Thirty-six, 38, 5, 21. Still mixed. You need revision. Still need revision. A little bit of revision is needed. Matter of Pallalur. Yes, correct or not? Chalukya versus Pallavas. Yes, correct, incorrect, correct. Very good. Battle of Narmada. Pushyabhutis versus Pallavas. No, they should be Chalukya. And Raichur conflict. Pallavas versus Maitrakas. No, Pallavas versus Chalukyas. Now, are you able to understand what to do with this all this information? I've actually given you very limited information. So we take a break here, and when we come back, we'll talk about one Arghat and then move on to what we call as the tripartite struggle. Right? Okay. So let's take a break here, and it is what 1:42. Because I've gone too long, I'll give you a 15 minutes break, not an issue. So we'll come back at not 2. Okay, let's come back at 2 p.m. Acceptable? Okay. See you. Okay, welcome back. Welcome, Sabir. When will we start art and culture syllabus? Art and culture. Let me tell you 1 second. Date I'll tell you. Second, third medieval, ninth medieval. You should join 9th September, 10th September week for sure. So I think till 9th we'll do medieval. But next, second, third, and next to next weekend, you have to make sure. Modern, Ankit, I'm not sure. Modern, you have to see when I do take one batch in October, and I'm not sure which October. You have to see the year-long calendar. I do take weekend batch. I know that. Okay, now I'm going to share a very important list with you right now, and this list is very simply going to be very useful in the larger perspective, wherein I'm going to give you the list of the post-Maurya Gupta and early medieval dynasties. Simple facts about them are given here also, which is the concept of Ganga, Kadamba, Kakatiya, this, that, Hoysala. I've given the basic data, but I want to very simply put them in a list so that you can use it for the examination. Before I do that, when we talk about the economy of this period, which is generally of post Gupta, the royal land grant tradition, we already know, a very important source of history, but also is something which happened throughout this period, something which is the most invaluable source. We also have a new technology which changed irrigation in India and is still used in India in quite a lot of sectors, and this is called the arhata, or the word which we use is arghata. Agrahata. You would have seen this for sure. The word, English word, is called Persian wheel. Persian wheel. It's a very simple concept. If you have a well, for example, if you have a well and you're trying to draw water out of it, you would need a bucket. But that's a very slow process. For irrigation purposes, this is more or less useless. So what is developed at this point of time is how, using a draught animal, which is like a bull and oxen, they use a contraption. This is called the Persian wheel, where this spins when this spins, and this therefore spins this shaft. And there are buckets attached to this whole contraption, which goes down and comes up and then dumps the water in the stream, and this can be used for irrigation. This whole system is called an agrahata, arghata, whatever you want to call it, which is called a Persian wheel. This is an invention, it's a new technology which was adapted at this point of time in the post-Gupta period, quite common. So, importance of arghata allowed for what we call as agrarian expansion. We will also talk about Brahmadeyas, not right now. When we talk about Cholas, I will discuss this term with you, so you have to sit on this. But simple point is, royal patronage to Brahmins will make them landed elites, which is that Brahmins, because they keep on getting land grants, will now become a landed class. Landed class. Now, there is one interesting thing which happens in Brahmins also, and let's try to understand that, which is that within Brahmins, there is also sub categorization as per geography and region, which is that if a Brahman gets a land grant in his own village, he is considered superior. And if a Brahmin gets it in a different village, basically if he's a migratory Brahman, then he is considered inferior, which is basically the Brahmins now develop a hierarchy amongst themselves. This is an interesting thing. And this is basically coming out of the fact that if you are going to some other village for the land grant, it is considered a bad thing. If you are getting the land grant in your own village, which is considered a good thing. So superior and inferiority within Brahmins also comes through. All are Brahmins, but hierarchy is developed generally. So before I go and talk about the list, very simply, what we've done till this point is that we have discussed the Pallavas, Chalukyas, and the Pushyabhutis. Anybody has any issue in this? If not, then I give you the most important list of post Gupta and early medieval dynasties. Can I talk about this? Everybody's with me, no issues till this point. Everybody's following what we are doing. Yes, come on. Yes. Okay. Let's then talk about 1 second. Yes. Okay. Now then let's very simply make the list. I'll write it down, then I'll explain it to you. We'll start with Vakatakas, Guptas, Pallavas, Kadambas, Varmans, Western Ganga. So the ones which I have not even discussed, I'm giving you in this list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 250 to 500, 300 to 500, 275 or 300 to 897 CE, 345 to 540, 350 to 650, 350 to 1000 CE. These are in chronological order also. You can see they're actually in chronological order. Then we move to, I'll come back and discuss each one of them. Where is Western Ganga? Maitrakas, Pushyabhutis, Chalukyas, Pratihara, Pala, Rashtrakutas. And a very important disclaimer. Everybody look at me. Very important disclaimer. As much as you would be a social worker, whatever it may be, please don't share this list with anybody other than yourself in no group study circles. Because collating this takes a lot of time and it is only for your eyes. So there's a song called For Your Eyes Only. This is for your eyes only. Very simply, do not spread this on standard random platforms. This can help you answer most of the questions just by remembering the sequence. That's it. So very simply, not for circulation, only for you. Acceptable to everyone? Yes, good. Okay. So, okay. Western Rashtrakutas. So you have Maitrakas 475, 776. The difficult part is actually to find their dates. Thereafter, Rashtrakutas, Somavanshi, Cholas, Hoysalas, Senas, Kakatiyas. Yadavas. One, three, five. And Yadava's 1 second date is here. 1187 1187 1317. Okay. One, two, three, four, five, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So I have given you a list of what we call as 17 different dynasties. And if you see, we are concentrating on some of them. For example, we have discussed Vakatakas, we've discussed Guptas, discussed Pallavas, and other than that, we have gone forward and discussed the Pushyabhutis, the Chalukyas. Now, our next endeavor is going to be to understand Pratihara, Pala, Rashtrakuta. Then we will discuss Cholas. And other than this, this is basically a sequence. In 2023, the question which came in the examination from the post-Gupta early medieval period could have been done just by remembering these 3 slides or knowing their basic sequence. And the question was, which of the following have their origin in the 9th to 11th century period? And the answer was very simple via the Maitrakas, Pushyabhutis, Chalukya were given, Pratihara was given. I'll show you that question also. This is a very important confidential list for your consumption. I would encourage you to write this down in very good handwriting, bold letters, and paste it somewhere in your studies area, study circle, so that you can revise it and see it from time to time. It will help you, and it will generally allow you to answer a lot of questions in the examination. Sometimes just knowing the chronology is good enough, is enough to write in the paper the basic things itself. So we have discussed the Vakatakas, Guptas, Pallavas, Pushyabhuti, Chalukyas. If I have your permission, then I would just go through these other dynasties in one line, whatever is important, mark what is important, and then we can enter the tripartite struggle, which is the most important area. Yes, everybody is with me, no issues till this point. I hope you understand the importance of this list. Takes a lot of time to collate, but as I said, I've given it to you so that there is no issue later. Can I move forward? Is everybody with me? Okay. So let's talk about the Gangas. Western Gangas ruled in ancient Karnataka. Nothing more needs to be known. Kadambas again in the Karnataka sector, and from the Banaswari sector, modern day, they were expanding. These two, Kadambas and Gangas, were actually conquered by whom? Were conquered by whom? Kadambas and Gangas. Who conquered them? You know the name of that person. Yes, Chalukya. Which Chalukya? Who Chalukya? Chalukya. What is the name of the ruler? Pulkeshin II. Great. The Kadambas, the person who founded the dynasty, Mayur Sharma, 345. Then you have the Kakatiyas. This is, we are jumping to this in the same sector to modern day Telangana and eastern Karnataka and southern Odisha. A dynasty which is called Kakatiyas. Very important because they used to rule from Warangal. We will discuss Kakatiyas, and I'm telling you Kakatiyas for a very simple reason, because the Ramappa temple, which got the UNESCO World Heritage tag, it was a Kakatiya dynasty temple. You have Ganpati Deva as the most significant ruler who was able to expand into the Telugu speaking sector itself, and one of the most important personalities when it comes to women power in ancient India. Rudrama Devi was one of the few queens in ancient Indian history who ruled, and Marco Polo, when he came to India, he actually referred to Rudrama Devi and her rule. So Kakatiya's two very important distinctions: Ramappa temple and also female ruler. Very important in that regard, very, very important in the larger context. Thereafter, Hoysalas, very, very important for Vesara style. And they are in the news generally because of the Chennakeshwara temple. We will discuss Chennakeshwara, Hoysaleshwara temple, again related to UNESCO. Again, Karnataka based. They were having their main two centers in Bellur and Helibed, and their temples, Hoysaleshwara temple and Helibed, Chennakeshwara temple, very, very beautiful example of Vesara style, and also patronize other texts. We will discuss this, all this to just give you a basic understanding of art and culture. Then comes the last of all, which is Yadavas of Devagiri, which is very simply again in this sector, Tungabhadra sector itself, and had a very big presence, which the Delhi Sultanate will later challenge. Then you have the Maitrakas. If you remember, Maitrakas were the ones who were ruling over the Gujarat sector. And who was the founder of the Maitrakas? The founder was a Senapati in the Gupta Empire itself. You have Bhatraka, and he was the one who was becoming a feudatory, and he was able to capture power and establish a rule in the Gujarat sector itself. Then you have the Somavanshis of Odisha, Odisha-centric dynasty, and the Varmans of Kamrupa, which is nothing but the northeastern sector. Samudragupta's contemporary, Pushyavarman, was the one who actually established the Varman dynasty. And Kamrupa, this independent state in the North Indian sector, was extremely resilient and remained there for a very long time also. Senas, they are basically the successors of the Palas, and they were basically the ones who took away a Buddhist dynasty and established a Brahmanical dynasty in Bengal. So, a very important dynasty we will discuss again in the context of art and culture, but after the Palas. So, before I truly enter, I'll show you these questions. Before I truly enter early medieval dynasties, which is medieval module number 1, I want to ask you a question. Straightforward. We are done with ancient, we are done with medieval, early medieval part 1. Anybody has any issue in grasping what we are trying to do, or what is the importance of the list I've given you, or what we are actually doing? Anybody has an issue? I hope you will, through different revisions, be able to learn the facts itself. But I hope you are now able to understand ancient and medieval. That is the basic point. Because sometimes these names actually just are random things to you, but at least they now resonate with you in certain ways. You need revision. 110% you need revision. There's no doubt in that. But even without revision, when I say Chalukya, when I say Pallava, when I say Pushyabhuti, when I say Pulkeshin II, when I say Mahendravarman, when I say Harshvardhan, when I say Banbhatta, for example, I say Ayol, this should resonate with you or have some meaning in your mind. If it does have it, then my work is done, and we can now move into Pala Pratyahara Rashtrakuta sector in that regard. Can we do it? I want everybody's consent, then only we move forward. Because this is medieval module number 1. Now we are purely in medieval. Okay, 7 modules of medieval. This is the first one. We'll discuss Pala, Pratihara, Rashtrakuta, and Cholas. 4 dynasty we have to discuss. Okay. Now, $1,000,000 question. What to, you want to see the list again? You want to take a screenshot? To take a screenshot, not an issue. As it is, you will get it in the annotated PPT. This is 1, 2, 3. Maitraka, the Vakatakas, Gupta, Pallava, Kadamba, Varman, and Western Ganga. Maitraka, Pushyabhuti, Chalukyas, Pratihara, Pala, Rashtrakuta. This is what we have to do. Pala, Pratihara, Rashtrakuta. Then Somavanshi, Cholas we will discuss. Hoysala, Sena, Kakatiyas, Yadavas as the last. After this, as it is Delhi Sultanate. We will discuss that. Okay. Now, when we talk about medieval, our NCRTs will change. We'll come back to these questions later. Our NCRTs have now become very simply the 12th class part 2 and class 7th. Class 6th is ancient, class 7th is medieval, and class 8th is basically modern. Part 1 is ancient, part 2 is medieval, part 3 is modern. And you would have to go through a very well written book. Satish Chandra is not a difficult book, but this is basically the old NCRT republished by Orient Black Swan. This is 1986 NCRT. But as I said, this NCRT plus PPT is the must, is the must in that regard. No, I cannot ignore this in that sense. Now, for the first module, from Satish Chandra, 2 chapters we are covering. And from 7th class NCRT, we are covering 1 chapter. As always, this is your guide to learning if you want to learn yourself. Now let's talk about North India tripartite struggle. Now, whilst the Chalukyas, the Pallavas, and the Pushyabhutis were fighting with each other, out of each one of them came out much bigger and much powerful dynasties. In the eastern sector came the Palas. In the northern sector came the Pratiharas. And in the Deccan sector came out the Rashtrakutas. And in the deep south came the Cholas. The distinction of these 3 is that they all were fighting for one area. And this is called the Kannauj sector. All 3 wanted the same thing. The Cholas are totally chilling in the south. They don't really care about what is happening in the north. But these 3 are locked into conflict for a century. And because there are 3 players, 1, 2, 3, it's called the tripartite struggle. Tripart means three part struggle. Tripartite struggle. And it is for Kannauj. Kannauj is very fertile and major trading center. Major trading centers. So Pala, Pratihara, Rashtrakuta, it is actually the Pratiharas who used to actually hold this sector, the Kannauj sector. And these 3 are fighting with each other. Palas having a conflict with these Pratiharas and Rashtrakutas, tripartite struggle. Somebody was fighting with somebody for sure. 3-way fight it was. That is why it's called tripartite struggle. So the terminology tripartite is basically based on this only, or what is called the Kannauj triangle in that regard, which is the fact that you have the Gujra Pratiharas, the Rashtrakutas and the Palas, or we can very simply argue the Rashtrakutas, the Palas, and the Pratiharas fighting for this place, Kannauj. This is the sector they're fighting for. The Cholas are in the southern sector. We will discuss that later. Cholas are the after lunch break, most probably. So, geography is clear, understanding is clear. Geography clear, then I'll start to talk about these three. Okay. Now, Palas. Now, there's a very important distinction or uniqueness about the Palas, which is they are the first and the last fully Buddhist dynasty of Eastern India, and very simply, they were the ones who revived and protected Buddhist culture and architecture for certain years in this sector. They are also the ones who very simply are considered the, if you want to say, they created a language, Abahata, which later became the mother of Bengali, Maithili, and Udiya. Therefore, this whole language family which we have in this sector is because of the Palas. So they have very important cultural contribution as new language which became the cultural identity of this sector. Other than that, the only thing which the examiner can play with is a little bit of names. But if you can remember this, that they're Buddhist, most of the answers can be answered from this only. That they will mostly play with this concept that they are what religion. And their most important feature being Buddhist can give you most of the answers. So when we talk about the Palas in that regard, you have multiple rulers: Gopala, Dharampal, Devpal, Mahipal, Rampal, and Madanpal. Now, they're a little bit kind to us because again, they put Pala Pala in their name. So we basically don't need to remember their name categorically because we will be able to identify them. But there are two exceptions. There are two exceptions. See, you have to remember Gopala. This should not be a problem. Gopal name comes out of this only. So Gopala is the first. This is you have to learn. Now, why am I saying that? Very simply, there's an exception. Because somehow, if you go to the Pratiharas, Mahendrapal, though he's basically a Pratihara ruler, he and his next three rulers somehow took Pala 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 name. Somehow they liked it. Now, very simply, this means there are two Mahipals. There's one Mahipal here and there's one Mahipal here. But their time periods are different. So there UPSC can't ask a question because they would have to specify the ruler's dynasty. The exception is Mahendrapal is not a Pala ruler. See, why am I telling you? Because if you can learn that Mahendrapal is the exception, then you don't have to learn other than Gopal anyone else's name. So either you learn everybody's name or you remember the exception. Exception is Mahendrapal is a word along with very simply Devpal. Dev Mahi they can't do because they would have to specify. The Pala ruler Devpal, the Pratihara ruler Devpal. That defeats the question itself. So very simply, Mahendrapal is not a Pala ruler but a Pratihara ruler. This is the exception. If you can learn the exception, then you can learn this list easily. So which one do you want? Learn each and every name, or remember that Mahendrapal is the Pratihara ruler, not a Pala ruler. Which is easier to do? Which is easier to do? Exception. Great. So Pala, first thing, is the name of the rulers itself. Then Gopal is the first and founder. When he died, Pala kingdom included Bengal and parts of Bihar. But his important contribution is Gopal established a very important ancient center of learning, ancient center of Buddhist learning, and that is called Odantapuri. The people who are from this sector would know that Odantapuri till today, along with Nalanda and Vikramshila, is considered three very important universities. So Odantapuri from Bihar was actually established by Gopal, and he's actually considered a proper first Buddhist ruler of Bengal itself. However, his successor Dharampal went a step further, and he was a pious Buddhist, and he established Vikramshila University, which is again a very important dynasty, a very important center of learning, and under him the Palas became very powerful. Now please pay attention. Nalanda, Odantapuri, Vikramshila. In this, there can be a question. Please pay attention now, please. Who established Nalanda University? I've already done it with you. Very good. Kumar Gupta of Gupta dynasty. Odantapuri, Gopala, Dharampala of Palas. Now, please pay attention. 5%, 50% of the questions can be done by this basic understanding. Who is Nalanda's establisher? Who is Vikramshila's establisher? Who is Udantapuri's establisher? But there's a major difference. Nalanda University is a Mahayanic center of learning, and Vikramshila is Vajrayanic center of learning. So basically, there's a difference between Nalanda and Vikramshila in their orientation. Vikramshila, very simply, is Vajrayanic, which is Tantra Mantra, and Nalanda is Mahayanic, which is the original Hinayanic Mahayanic distinction. This is a very, very important slide, again summarized in one place. Please do remember it. This can help you answer most of the questions on any of the learning institutions, and generally when it comes to the basics of statement based questions. And I will also use this to give you 2-3 statements so that we can understand it and revise in the end. Now, Devpala extended empire to Assam, Odisha and Kamrupa. Staunch Buddhist, defeated the Rashtrakutas. Standard politics and fighting will keep on happening. Then Mahipal recovered north and eastern Bengal from the Rashtrakutas. Rampal started disintegration. Madanpal Senas will replace the Palas. Now, the most important thing which you need to remember about the Palas, other than these rulers, is both learning centers patronized and revived, not an issue. Now, Abahata is a language which is attributed to the Palas, which is very simply the mother of Bengali, Assamese, Udiya, and Maithili, and is attributed to the work of Charyapada. Charyapada is the one who wrote it, and therefore the most important contribution is that Abahata, which is Bengali, Assamese, Udiya, and Maithili language precursor, was developed under the Palas. And you have a merchant called Suleiman who came from the Arab sector who talked about the Palas in his book. And you also have a Java king who sent a Java had a good relationship with Nepal. Can anybody tell me why Southeast Asia would have a good relationship with the Palas? Why Balaputra Deva would have a good relationship with the Palas? Come on, use your analytical mindset. Yes, very good. Buddhist link. The Buddhist link allowed them to have a very good relationship with Southeast Asia. So, before I move to Pratiharas, let me summarize everything. What do you have to remember? Gopala, Dharampala, Abahata, Nalanda, Odantapuri, Vikramshila, then Southeast Asia, good relationship, Mahendrapal, not Pala ruler. Can you remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 of these facts? And if you've actually ever tried to go through the Satish Chandra, or I encourage you to just open Satish Chandra once, you will realize how condensed this data is actually. You would have to read 5 to 6 pages to come up with these 8 basic facts. So I am telling this to you because we tend to take for granted the PPT. The PPT has been used as a way of condensation of this data. So don't think that there's no further detail. I'm not giving you unnecessary detail. If you're interested to read about the Palas, be my guest, read the chapter. But here, my understanding and orientation is very specific, which is that you have to have very simply a certain orientation. 8 facts about the Palas. Anybody has any issue? PPT plus NCRT is enough. Come on. Abahata is the precursor of Bengali, Maithili, Udiya, and Assamese. All of them, that's why sound the same also, is because they all have the same precursor. Abahata developed during Pala period. Okay. Abahata, as I said, is the precursor of Bengali, Assamese, Udiya, and Maithili. Okay. Had a good relationship with Southeast Asia because of Buddhism. Now come the Pratiharas. Also sometimes called the Gujra Pratiharas. The Gujra Pratiharas, very simply, we believe that the Pratiharas were the local dynasty, and there was a pastoralist fighting tribe which migrated into Indian subcontinent. Pastoralist fighters who were in the northern sector migrated into the Pratihara sector, and then they intermingled. They became Gujra Pratihara in that regard. Now, in the examination, the examiner will play with one basic fact, and you can remember it, and you will always remember one thing. In most of the books, they will write that the first ruler of the Pratiharas is Bhoja. Mihir Bhoja, as is called. No. Nagbhatta is the first ruler. Second ruler is Bhoja. If you can remember this, again, the examiner does not have a lot to play with here. Other than playing with the name of Bhoja itself, Nagbhatta is the founder, not Bhoja. Bhoja is considered the real founder because he established the empire well. But the founder in the literal sense is Nagbhatta. So please, again, this is the only place where UPSC can play with the words so as to give you a tricky question. Now, when we talk about the Pratiharas, first capital was Bhimmal with Nagbhatta as the founder. The first consolidator and expansion happened under him. Very simply, he is considered the greatest and the real founder, basically the one who made it important. So real founder is Bhoja. But the problem with Bhoja is there are multiple people called Bhoja. So we call him Mihir Bhoja, and because there's one more Bhoja of the Paramars who are Rajputs later. But we know that he's not a Pala, he's not a Pala, or he's not basically a Buddhist, because he was a devout devotee of Lord Vishnu, and his title was Adivara. Why did he take the title Adivara, which was found on his coins? Why did he take the title Adivara? What is the logic of Adivara? Very good. Adivara Vara is one of the avatars of Lord Vishnu. That is why you have the Adivara concept. He is the one who was able to actually hold on to Kannauj for a very long time. And Baghdad based merchant Al Masudi came to the to the Pratiharas in the later period, but he refers to the power of Bhoja quite a lot. The second most powerful ruler of this dynasty is Mahendrapal, who is the successor of his father Bhoja, and he was able to extend his empire even more towards the east in that regard, wherein he was fighting with the Palas itself. Patronized a very important person, Raj Shekhar, who is considered basically the Kalidas of his period. So Mahendrapal was the one who gave a lot of patronage to Rajsekhar, who wrote a lot of Sanskrit poets and dramatics, or what we call as dramas at this point of time. And very simply, he was the one who was was fighting with Indra III of the Rajputas. Now again, a lot of information, what to do with it. Naga Bhatta Bhoja Mahendrapala 1. Founder, consolidator, and expansion. Al Masudi, trader. Vaishnavites. Vaishnavites. Other than that, patronized Raj Shekhar, poet, and nothing more needs to be remembered. Can you remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? 6 things. 6 things. Hi Sabir, once we are done with this section, we'll take up the questions. Don't worry, it will just take us another 5 minutes. Vaishnavites, again explain. They follow Lord Vishnu. Vaishnavites. And that is why their titles also take this way of arguing that they're Adi Vara, Mihir Bhoja. These are all things which they take from Lord Vishnu. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Yes? Okay. Now, 4. What is 4? Patronized Rajsekhar poet. What is the issue in this? He gave money to a poet who is considered the Kalidas of his period. I have asked 8 there. Nagbata, Bhoja, Mahendrapal. Nothing big here. Can I move forward? With Rashtrakutas, we will then end our discussion and I'll open it for live chat, live calls, and let's see if you have certain questions. Fifth point you missed. Al Masudi is a trader who traveled in this period to the what we call as into the Mahendrapal period, but he refers to Bhoja and his power in that regard. You can see merchants are coming from the Arab sector quite a lot now. The Rashtrakutas are the easiest. Rashtrakuta Danti Durga we already referred to. He was a Chalukyan general who was able to capture power and establish himself as at Mankhed. Now, why are they easiest? Because tell me one thing. What is common to all the names of the Rashtrakuta rulers? Tell me. What is common to all of their names? Yes, all are Lord Vishnu avatars or names. Danti Durga, Govinda, Amog Varsha, Indra, Krishna, all. So in the examination, if you see a Hindu god name, Lord Vishnu's name, it is most probably Rashtrakuta. This is the easiest way to remember their names. I've given you 3 tricks. Pala, Pala, Pala is Pala, except for Mahendra Pala. Nagbhatta, Bhoja, Mahendra Pala. Hindu god's name, Rashtrakutas. Is it making sense? This is called tricks and tips of learning. This is how you learn. You learn exceptions, you learn tricks. Clear, everyone? Yes? Okay. Tip 3. Pala, 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 except Mahendra Pala is Pala ruler. Naga Bhoja Pratihara and Hindu gods Rashtrakuta. Anybody has now any issue? This is the trick. Yes? Okay. Now here we don't have to go into each and every ruler. Agmogvarsh has a rule of 64 years, quite a long one, but he wanted to have more cultural contribution than actually war. That is why during his period, quite a lot of conflict and internal rebellions were there, feudatory mentality. It is his grandson Indra III who actually established his rule quite well. Indra 1 and 2 are important because they are the ones who constructed Kailashnath temple at Ellora. We will discuss that. And Krishna 3 was the one who expanded it to even take the Chalukyas of Vengi, which is the eastern sector Chalukyas also. They were Vaishnavites, but very simply also patronized Shiva and Vishnu both. And they were the first to allow Muslim traders to settle in their port areas so that they could foster trade. This is a very, very syncretic and tolerant approach which the Rashtrakutas had. So, very simply, we have discussed Pala Pala Pala, except Mahendra Pala is Pala, Nagabhatta and Bhoja, Hindu gods, Amogvarsh, Krishna, Indra are the ones which are important to us. These 3. Now, just to close this area so that we can, once we come back, when Mahendra Pala is not a Pala, Mahendra Pala is a Pratihara. So, I've written is not, right? Is not. Yes. Now, just so that we can close this and come back and start Cholas after lunch itself, we need to know about their administration. Here again, there is a lot of convergence, so it's easy. We know that the king is hereditary. Everybody knows that. Armed forces were fragmented. Everybody again knows that. They had different officers around them, ministers, treasurers, senapatis. Everybody knows that. But what is more important to us is that how did they divide their empire? Now here you have to just remember, Pala and Pratiharas have the same terms, whilst Rashtrakutas have a different term. Very simply, the Palas used to divide it according to Bhukti, Mandala, or Vishya, which is that the biggest unit was Bhukti, lowest was Vishya. Vishya and Bhukti. So you see Bhukti and Vishya. Governor is Uparika and Vishyapati. Can you tell me one thing? Have these terms already been told to you? Yes, these are Gupta terms. These are Gupta terms. Exactly Gupta terms. Not Maurya, but Gupta terms. Guptas also called it Bhukti, also called it Vishya. Exact same terms. So if you learn the Guptas one, Pala Pratyahara automatically is remembered. Now, the Rashtrakutas, the smallest is basically the during this period, smallest is called, or the Samantas, who very simply the word Samanta, Bhoja, or rather Maharathi or Mahabhoja is basically a reference to feudatory. That is why in Hindi, feudalism is called Samantavad. Samantavad, Samantavad. Rashtrakutas did not have two but three layers. Very interestingly, Rashtrakutas divided their area in the other way around. They had Rashtra, Visya, Bhukti. So they actually reversed it. And the one who ruled the Rashtra was called the Rashtrapati. The word which we use for our president is coming out of here only. Rashtra Vishya Bhukti, head is called Rashtrapati, and same function as the Uparika. Village is the smallest unit, and you also have Gram Mahajans as smaller, what we call as units. In both, the smallest unit is the village, and you could have Gram Mahajanas as the headman. So here, this is the province, this is the district. But what they did was province, district, they added an intermediate level. And this is important because in the examination, they can ask you this sequence. They've already asked the concept of what we call as Suba, Sarkar and Pargana. This is the other area. So if you can remember Gupta, you automatically remember Pala Pratihara and reverse it and add Rashtra for Rashtrakutas. You will get Rashtrapati. Clear, everybody? Come on. Clear? Yes, very good. Then you also have what we call as revenue officers called the Desa Gramakutas, who are basically revenue officers who are hereditary. And they later become what we call as two very important surnames, Deshpandes and Deshmukhs. Deshpandes and Deshmukhs are nothing but revenue officers who emerged during Rashtrakuta phase. So there are two more words which you need to remember here. Deshmukh and Deshpande. These are two words which come out of the hereditary revenue officers. Now, we stop here before we go to Imperial Chola. We will start that after the lunch break. Now, very simply, please understand this point. What I want you to do is, once I'm back, I'm going to take 2-3 what we call as questions with you. Don't have to learn the titles of the kings, not a net level examination. I am going to, as I did for the post-Gupta period, I will do it for the early medieval also. Let's see how much you remember in 40 minutes. My only request to you is you have to be very clear in now telling me, is everything making sense or not? Is everything making sense or not? First, I need everybody's chat-based consent. Yes, sir, we are following what is happening. Imperial Chola, very important topic. Then we go into Turkish invasion, again, very, very important topic. So till this point, everybody is with me, no issues. Yes or no? Yes? No? Okay. Yes, okay. Now I open the floor for any form of live calls. If you want to call me and ask me something, I open that. I've enabled live call feature, and I encourage you to call me and ask if you don't want to type it. So yes, please, if there's a question, we will take these questions and then we'll go for lunch. Don't have to remember titles. Come on, tell me. Is this making sense or not? Okay. Okay. Everybody said yes. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, sir. No issues. More internal fighting. I mean, dynasty. Okay. There's one request which has come from Sabir. Let's take his call. Sabir, your call should be ringing. It is showing ringing to me here, but I think you're not getting it, right? Okay, I'm again taking Sabir's call. I'll try to do it again. If not, we'll then take a break. Okay, right. Last slide, please. Any revision technique? Dhanraj, I'm telling you that this is the last slide. You want to be here. Their internal fighting, I mean, dynastic wars are they're not important. No, Saurabh. Dynastic wars are not important. Internal in fighting, who's coming, not important to us. Okay. So I think there's an issue with the feature because I'm sending a call, but the student is not able to pick up. Rafia, I think the same is happening with you also. I'm calling you back, but it's not working. Okay. So, okay, we'll get this resolved. No issues. Sabir, I'm calling you right now. It's saying ringing here, but I think there's nothing on your side. Okay, I'll cancel it. Thank you. Okay, so can we take a break? Can we go for lunch now? Sir, was Kannauj finally captured? It was Samhita mostly with Pratiharas, in between with Palas and Rashputas also. It's a little bit of interplay between them. Explain this slide. You have the administrative terminologies for both. Pala Pratihara, you should divide their empire into Bhukti, province, and district Vishya. And Rashputa is not two levels but three levels. Rashtra, then Vishya, and then Bhukti. Bhukti is district in this. Here it is very simply the Uparika or the province. So the names are remain the same, but the levels change. That is it. Right? Naveen, it should be in your doubt area. There should be a feature to call me, but there's an issue. Rashtrakutas came out of the Chalukyas, the Pratiharas came out of the Pushyabhutis, and the Palas came out of the Varmans. Vishya and yes, Vishya is a word which is both, but the terminology is different in both. Yes, different levels. Okay. So can we go for lunch now? No issues? Come back and cholas. All this should be clear. I'll take a test after the lunch break itself. Yes, great. So see you at now 3:45. I've taken some of your time. I'll see you at 3:45, and we will thereafter take up from 3:45 to 5:40. We'll go about it. Right? Thank you. Take care and see you at 3:45. Have a good lunch.